Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1password. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Identiverse 2025 is returning to Las Vegas June 3rd through 6th. You can hear from over 250 expert speakers and connect with over 3,000 identity security professionals across 4 days of keynotes, breakout sessions, and deep dives into the latest identity security trends. Plus, you can take part in hands-on workshops and explore the brand new non-human identity pavilion. Register now and save 25% with code IDV25-SecurityWeekly at securityweekly.com/IDV2025. Geoff Cairns joins us today to talk about some of the top trends shaping identity and access management in 25, which is, I believe, is also the title of a talk that you're going to be giving at Identiverse 2025, correct?
No, not at Identiverse 2025, but it's a report that we've issued from Forrester that's out there for Forrester clients.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, we are. So typically before Identiverse, because CRA owns this podcast and Identiverse, we will bring some folks that are speaking at the event. I couldn't remember if you were one of those or not. Are you going to the event?
I may be. It depends on my evaluative research schedule here.
Gotcha.
But, yeah.
Sorry for putting you on the spot right off the bat. So Geoff is a principal analyst at Forrester. He advises clients on IAM, MFA, identity as a service, and all other things identity. Welcome to the show, Geoff.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of good stuff in this report. You've got 8 trends here. We're not going to have time to discuss all 8 trends, but maybe if you want to just go over the 8 real quick, and then we'll pick one to dive into.
Okay. Yeah. And again, there's some common themes between these, but basically we had, as you say, 8 trends. Deepfake detection remaining very difficult as one of those trends. Zero trust. Agentic AI becoming the norm, phishing resistant MFA adoption surging in the workforce, machine identity management hitting a tipping point or breaking point in the enterprise. Identity verification goes to the core of identity security is our 5th trend. Decentralized identity, or decentralized digital identity, I should say. And that wallet adoption continuing to fragment. Post-quantum cryptography beginning to influence IAM in a big way. And then lastly, shared signals becoming an identity security market catalyst, and a lot of great things, I think, to become of that emerging standard. So that's kind of the quick rundown. And yeah, definitely would like to kind of pick and choose and dive in.
Yeah, and, it occurs to me, I did open the shared signals framework page to read up on that. Never ended up doing it. That tab is lost to time somewhere. Maybe just give us a little overview of like what the purpose of that shared signals framework is. Like what the purpose of that is.
Yeah, basically this is establishing standard so that systems can exchange shared signals, shared risk signals in particular, in this case. So it really opens up a lot of opportunity here for both identity, but also in the broader perspective of security operations overall, being able to take real-time action on threats that are detected. So greatly accelerating kind of response times.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. We were just talking about standards for SIM events, for ingesting events into SIMs in the last conversation. So that's and that's interesting because that's not even something going through a SIM. That's from like one identity product to another, right?
Yeah, and even beyond that. So you're seeing folks tie into that, like CrowdStrike as well, those types of solutions to where they can detect a risk event, send a security signal to an IAM system. That IAM system can then take action for that particular threat, but also take more proactive actions if necessary. To toggle other policy triggers and whatnot.
Yeah, so maybe it's killing a session, maybe it's sending an MFA, like a something weird happens. Let's get an additional token code or something like that from you. Make sure it's still
Right.
you.
Yeah. If it's detected a change in the risk posture, now something is deemed risky behavior by one of those systems, that's communicated at large to the ecosystem, right? And various systems can take different actions on that, and like you say, really enable some more proactive things to occur as far as next steps.
It sounds like a piece of what SOAR was supposed to be, right? It's this kind of so SOAR
Yeah,
in my opinion, SOAR was sold as FSD when really it's not. It's like the alarm on your car window, right?
Full self-driving. Yeah.
But yeah, I think
Yeah.
it sounds like this is part of the thing that was the promise of SOAR that died as soon as XDR was a thing, that died as soon as Zero Trust was a thing, that died as soon as Agentic AI was a thing.
Yeah, so this is really the open standards to help facilitate all that, right, and get the buy-in. And I think some pretty significant vendors have been involved in it and pushing it forward. So, like I said, it's still emerging very much, but it's on its way, and I think it's getting very positive traction. And I think it does hold a lot of potential to really change a lot of things in terms of tightening up identity security.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's pivot a bit into deepfake detection. It's this was one of those where I was like, are we really going to see attackers doing this? Are we really going to see? Because there's the thing with the Hong Kong CEO, and they used it as part of an elaborate BEC scam and stole 25 million. And or the CEO in Hong Kong, I forget if it was actually a Hong Kong based company, but and we didn't see it again for a while. And then all of a sudden we started seeing it in employment interviews of all things. We started seeing it for hiring, and it's picked up a little bit there. And we've seen it in some audio only scams, right? Mom, I'm in jail, need to bail me out type stuff. So is this kind of, what are you seeing here? Like there's technological solutions. I've seen a few out there for this, but also like I would imagine this is just a change. Like when I've seen some of those recordings of people recording this interview with somebody doing a deep fake, like they're asking them to put their hand in front of their face and stuff like that. Like I didn't realize that helped with like the face replacement or whatever software is going on there. So we're seeing, is it as simple as that? Maybe like either you buy a $100,000 product or you just tell somebody to wave their hand in front of their face. Like those are your options. Is that what you're seeing here?
Well, I think this is definitely one of those areas that defense in depth is critical. So I think there's a number of different layers to it, and it's, again, depending on how sophisticated and what you're trying to prevent. I think this, as you said, there's many different cases of this, ranging from folks just hacking and fooling around with stuff and fooling folks, to nation state starting to get into really more sophisticated researched attacks, targeted attacks. So, obviously the AI behind this is getting cheaper, easier to get your hands on. Wider range of folks crashing the gates on this, and then add that and again, a lot of the turmoil that's going on in the world, the economic conditions, all that sort of like drives up the driving factors for fraud and attacks of this nature. So from a technology perspective, you see liveness detection, and things being baked in. It's actually one of those other trends that we mentioned in the report in terms of identity verification being very much part of the process. And when you're onboarding an employee, going through the hiring process, making sure you take those steps, where a lot of that hiring today is being done, remotely. And some of this, started with the pandemic. And even back then, actually, the FBI had put out some, warnings about, hiring scams and things of that nature. So it's been around the last several years and ramping up. Obviously, again, getting much more sophisticated, difficult to detect. And you've got, again, some basic things that are being baked in, from gestures to liveness detection.
Yeah, we interviewed
Spectral
Aaron
analysis
Painter
is another area.
We
Sorry.
interviewed Aaron Painter from NameTag a couple weeks ago about this, and he was saying that they're using like cell phone, just a cell phone, because taking a selfie, it can kind of measure depth, and if you have to move your head and things like that. So I'm sure it's a company you're familiar with covering the area, but he had explained some of those. I think it was episode like 393. All the weeks blur
I
together,
can
but
find it real quick.
yeah, if you wanna
Just a
take a
second.
look at it, it's there's some kind of more in-depth
393. Yep.
information about how their tech works, but I'm sure it's one of many.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So these are things like there's a document verification aspect to it that then they tie in with a selfie and looking at that with a bit of liveness detection. So exactly those types of things are coming to the forefront and more being baked into broader platforms. So I think that, again, that's that other piece of the trend that we're seeing, these identity verification pieces, as they become more important, that's happening. And, it's a big area for venture capital investment these days in terms of deepfake detection. So, yeah.
So I got a few questions here. One of them is going to be around like talking about it being baked in versus some of the startups that we're seeing. I think that's an interesting question. Like, will this just be a module built into Zoom versus like, do you have to go out and buy a product from one of these vendors? But Jackie mentioning full self-driving, made me think of like some of the liveness detection that they do in vehicles nowadays to make sure that the driver is paying attention. Like I remember, I want to say it was Tesla, like you defeated it just by wedging an orange in the steering wheel, right? Make it think that you had your hands on the steering wheel, and then somebody would take a nap, and then people would take pictures of people like dead asleep in their Teslas on the way to work. And then some of them, and there's different technology out there. Like I think the GM one, the Cadillac, it does like an eye detection. I think Subaru does that as well. Like wants to like it'll pester you if your eyes are not facing forward for more than a couple seconds. And the reason I bring that up is I wonder how much of a game of leapfrog this is going to be. Like generally, when this kind of technology comes out, there'll be some way around it. There'll be some evasion, some trick attackers can use to get around that liveness detection. Sometimes it's something very silly and simple, or sometimes it's a bit more sophisticated. But do you see that happening here?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's just a constant kind of cat and mouse game, right? And that's part of what's intrinsic in identity security always, right? It's always constantly evolving. You're never going to hit unfortunately, a destination where everything's solved, right? The attacks just keep, changing. And so, yeah, that back and forth, I expect to see that continue. I expect, as attackers find new, gaps and loopholes, there'll be new technologies. I would emphasize too, though, that, it's not just the technologies, the processes and the human element have to come into play somewhat as well. So,
like waving your hand in front of your face for the folks that are not watching this. I was waving my hand in front of my face. So yeah, that speaking of leapfrogging, that takes me to phishing resistant MFA. I want to say it was Google. I heard is finally getting rid of text based like SMS TOTP codes. Was that it?
Yeah, finally.
Well, in terms of, I know in general, the industry is moving away from SMS and email-based OTP codes, and that's a general direction. In the report, what we're talking about is sort of the workforce adoption of phishing-resistant MFA, Obviously, a lot of organizations have started to adopt MFA, basic MFA. It's one of the best things you can do to start to fortify your defenses. But with the phishing MFA, with the basic MFA, you still are somewhat susceptible to phishing attacks. And so there's new standards that have been introduced, the FIDO passkeys. And this is something that really started up a while back. It had focused a little bit more specifically on kind of the consumer side of authentication and going passwordless. But it's getting back now to where device-bound passkeys, FIDO device-bound passkeys, is being supported in mobile applications, which is a pretty common form factor at this point for enterprise organizations protecting workforce access. So that's why we expect that surge in adoption to occur for the phishing resistant as some of these organizations continue to evolve their programs and kind of take that next step up in terms of MFA capabilities.
And what are you seeing in terms of? So I'm a big fan of passkeys from the standpoint that I felt security keys were almost a step back. Like I was very excited to not have to carry around a physical device, something I could forget. Yeah. Something on a key ring. I actually had a security key snap off in the USB port once, and early days with security keys on AWS, you could only enroll a single key. So if you broke it or something like that, you better have some kind of fallback, some kind of recovery.
I remember.
And but I imagine there are also failure cases for passkeys as well if they're only stored on certain devices or tied to certain devices. Mine are in my. Everybody knows what I use. I was hesitating to say which brand of password database I use, but mine are stored there. But I don't know if that's the right move. Like some of them get stored on your smartphone. Like what are you seeing in terms of where, how we're handling this for employees in such a way that, we've got to prepare for them making all the possible mistakes that they can make with these things, and help desks are going to have to deal with recovery situations.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head in terms of where I think the rubber hits the road on a lot of these MFA solutions and even the evolution of these solutions. It's the life cycle, recovery processes, things of that nature. So in terms of passkeys, with the device passkey, device-bound passkey, you're basically talking about kind of the equivalent of the secure hardware security key that you're talking about. Right, but in the form of your mobile device. So you still have those predicaments in terms of you're going to have to like reissue these keys, if you replace a device or things of that nature. And so this is some of the work that's going on in the FIDO Alliance to kind of, bring some more enterprise grade quality to things of this nature that become more critically important when you're talking about the workforce side of things. In consumer space, it's there's slightly different use cases and things, but they do also have obviously a recovery challenge, and again, that's probably more focused on the password element and removing passwords, whereas workforce, I think, it takes on a little bit more of a security focus.
I think there's one of the things that I've always seen as a flaw with mobile device is that it uses biometric data typically, but there's an inherent trust and assumption that biometric data is yours because your accounts are stored on that device. And so it seems like only one side of that needs to be compromised, and that, somebody hacks a mobile device's PIN and is able to add biometric device. There seems to be a level of trust of the association of the accounts on a device or the authenticator with the biometric data that seems like it shouldn't be there. That there's I don't like it, because you're not really forced to Yeah, every time you switch devices, you retrain that biometric data. So it just seems like there's so many opportunities because Google doesn't. So I have Google phones. Google doesn't store that biometric data. So every time I get a new device, I retrain it. So it just seems like an easy opportunity because we don't want our biometric data stored to compromise that chain.
Yeah, I mean, I think and this is where on the consumer side, the weakness in the passkey security is, especially if you're not, and as a consumer user, someone maybe not, barely can handle kind of passwords, never mind the more sophisticated things. You're talking about how they're protecting their own,
Or no, Okta. So like,
storage,
for me
right?
to access my enterprise's Okta, if I get a push, the only thing I need to do is thumbprint, right? And then I can hit yes, approve it. So that's just it. My thumbprint is literally the only thing standing between me and somebody's getting access to MFA. And sometimes it's facial recognition because you can use either biometric. So like if
But
there, you know what I mean? It seems like with MFA, if you can use something that's that easy for somebody to hold up to your face or wait till you get drunk and use your thumbprint. I don't know. There just seems to be it seems to be so much trust baked into these biometric security things that we use for mobile device MFA that I don't understand why we
on
trust
consumer devices, non-corporate owned devices, right?
Yeah, because everybody's BYOD. So
yeah, but I mean, the other thing I think that changes here when you're looking at it, and again, coming back to the phishing aspect of it, as opposed to passwords where it gets out there in the wild, it can be used, right? Here, that is being used to unlock, a private key on your phone, on your device. So it's accessing to do that, and then there's a cryptographic tunnel that's established. So you start layering in those pieces for that strength, and again, that kind of removes or makes that a phishing resistant process. So yeah, I agree. You sort of handle that aspect of things, but there's a whole slew of other things that then ensue in terms of user experience issues. Like I said, the life cycle aspects that definitely need to be wrung out. And
well, and to some extent, you plan for that to fail, right? Like that's why we're also talking about, on the client side, it's not infallible. We're also talking about detecting shady activity, doing some threat detection, the shared signals we were talking about. So you've got to be prepared to look for some shady behavior on, post compromise, right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, go back to this idea of defense in depth, zero trust mindset, right? So you authenticate it as strongly as you can, least privilege access, and then monitor and audit, log everything, and like you said, that's where these threat detection solutions are really coming around. You're seeing it quite a bit in all the major IAM vendors, really stressing those capabilities: identity protection, identity threat detection and response. The acronym soup continues: identity security posture management, ISPM.
Yeah.
So these types of capabilities, though, being built in, and so yeah, the trust in the device is augmented by these types of threat detection capabilities that are being baked in.
how do you
So
pronounce
while we
the acronym for identity as a service?
IDaaS.
IDaaS, yeah.
Just wondering because I was going to
It's
say
not the worst.
but
It's not. It's not the worst one out there. I'm not going to mention. There are a couple that are much worse. That you get very close to saying some inappropriate things. But well, we still have some time. I wanted to kind of move to the non-human stuff, and I'm trying to remember where I got this question, but somebody posed this question of how do you treat agentic AI? Do you treat it like an employee or do you treat it like a machine identity? And I thought that was a very odd question because it seems maybe a bit more obvious to me than I guess it does to other people. People are really anthropomorphizing AI and talk about it in such a way that just makes me uncomfortable because it's, I don't know. Interested to hear your take on this on with agentic AI. How do you handle that? Do you treat it like an identity, like an employee, or is it just another service account?
No, so I think this is an evolution as well, and there's a bit of a spectrum here. And if you look at kind of human identities on one end of that spectrum, and then machine or non-human identities on the other end of the spectrum, I think the AI stuff today, you're talking about bots and things of that nature that don't have a lot of intelligence necessarily built into them yet. They're not highly sophisticated. Those are clearly more on the machine end of things. I think as things become more agentic, more autonomous, those agents are acting on behalf of humans to do more things, and they're involved in much more complex decision-making processes. Again, acting autonomously, they become much more human-like. So I think they sway a little bit. They'll be different than anything that we've seen. So I think you have to kind of keep that in mind. But in terms of bringing it back to what's real today and what you should focus on, I think it's getting an understanding of how you're going to manage and incorporate the unification of machine identity and human identities in terms of how you look at the landscape of your environment and how you go about securing that and managing that environment. And visibility is a huge issue still. So just start by getting your hands around that, discovering what you've got out there today, and understanding what's coming in terms of new types of machine identities and where they might be hitting your environment.
And then they impersonate or fake their own biometrics so that they can biometric in with a second factor. But I wanted to ask, since most companies are hybrid now, have you found that they have a primary identity provider or IDP that they leverage? I mean, certainly there's capabilities that are enhanced when they're cloud focused or their IDP is a cloud-based one like Okta or Ping or similar. But a lot of companies that are hybrid have on-prem a provider that they're using like Active Directory. What are you seeing in the market and where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, this is definitely a shift that we're seeing. We are seeing kind of a convergence and a consolidation. A lot of larger enterprise organizations had multiple IDPs, multiple different authentication systems, et cetera, et cetera. So you're definitely seeing them want to reduce that footprint for cost and complexity purposes and everything else. So I would say, larger organizations, you're still probably going to have multiple IDPs, and as time goes on, that will probably shrink in number as well. But I don't think it's going to. I think a larger enterprise, you're still probably going to have multiple IDPs to service a variety of use cases. I think on the smaller end of things, smaller enterprises, SMBs, probably are looking at one primary IDP, and then perhaps they layer in a little bit more if they have to for a particular use case. But this is where I think some of the bigger platforms are really, they've brought together a lot of these technologies that were originally very siloed. So SSO, MFA are packaged up along with the directory and provided as a service. Now you're seeing identity governance getting layered in, privileged access. So there's definitely that direction that I think the buyers want to see from a easy to manage, easy to maintain, less problems and challenges with trying to manage multiple vendors.
Thank you.
On the agentic AI part, with the Air Canada mishap, giving fake discounts and things like that, your Forrester's advice is to go better prompt engineering and build some sort of zero trust. Do you see that happening in the industry anytime soon, or I feel like there's going to be more of those? What are your thoughts on that?
As far as AI security, in terms of, I think that we're seeing more folks recognize that needs to be part of their program, their identity program. And we're seeing and talking on the vendor side of things. You're seeing and talking to vendors that are putting it into their products, but also having to figure out how to deal with securing others with it. So I think it's early days, early stages, but we are starting to see that come up more and more as kind of a practice. And I think, again, early days, so I'm sure there'll be some lessons learned and some stumbling blocks. But I think as we increase kind of the understanding of what some of this is and how it interacts, you'll see increasing prioritization on some of those things.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
All right, good stuff. Geoff, thank you so much for joining us today on Enterprise Security Weekly. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
All right, stick around. We'll be back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.